I'm Latifa Fields, and we are here again as part of our profound conversations. And today we have with us Changa Bell. And Changa Bell is someone who is from Georgetown, certified as a health coach, a transformational author, and cultural activist. With more than 12 years of pioneering healing centered, informed yoga, he also does mindfulness and behavioral change programs. As founder of Sunlight and Yoga LLC and creator of Life Force Development and Santodanta Para Tatwa, please.
Santo Danta and Paratatma. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that. A
Mm,
training pathways program that helps individuals and organizations cultivate embodied resilience and autonomous leadership. Today,
mm.
we're going to speak about breath, power, and presence. Change Bell on Life Force and Liberation.
All right. I mean, I'll take it.
Changa.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there are some natural connections with Changa and change, right?
Yeah. When I tell people how to spell it, I say it's like change, but put an A at the end. And it still doesn't help though, because they're like, huh? What? Yeah. So it's all good.
So tell us about breath, power, and presence, and your work as a yoga practitioner who also empowers liberation.
Yeah, just first and foremost, just thanks to God for this opportunity. Thank you all for having me here. And definitely thanks to all the yogis in the East Indian culture that recorded it. I mean, arguably, you could say yoga started in Kemet in Egypt long ago, even before Eastern Indians did. But just kudos to all the ancestors whose shoulders I stand on and cultures who I'm appropriating to a degree with their science and their art form to help, keep people culturally aligned and sustainable in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty. So breathwork is just what it always has been in terms of pranayama, and it helps regulate your autonomous nervous system, and it can calm your central nervous system when it gets your just your biology in order. It's a way to unite yourself when you feel like you're getting off track. And then in terms of yoga, movement and mobility helps with anti-aging processes. And it's also a way of eating and incorporating a certain way of living, sleeping, all the things. It's just a really comprehensive science. And that's why I said thank you to uh, the cultures and the ancestors that brought it here today, so I can just be a good ambassador and try to represent it.
Well, you also are the founder of Black Male Yoga Initiative. So, how do you bring this ancient art of yoga? I mean, it came from Kemet, as you said, arguably, but back to a contemporary Black community as a tool for empowerment.
Yeah, just try to distill it. And in the Christian background, I was raised through Catholic and Christian schools. I just think I'm not really dogmatic in my approach to spirituality now as a middle-aged man. But it was just really, if you look at all the dogma, all the religious things, they're basically built on modeling. The heroes of all the stories is just that you should model, you should be the way, not necessarily pontificate the way. So what I try to do is live by example, and then just share testimony. Is never a thing of like, you should do this, you should do that. It's just like, hey, this is what I did to overcome a challenge that you know I encountered in this particular way. And if the vibe is right, and if people say, oh yeah, I'm experiencing that same thing, then they can do it, and they may reach out to me for assistance or support. But generally, I think to go around and sort of think that I have all the answers would be the wrong way. I have some answers, and I have some answers that uniquely helped me in my travels. So that's the way I've empowered others with it, is just to distill it down, just like They say Sanskrit is a dead language, but obviously you and I were just speaking it. So when you have Santo Danta and Paratapa, it doesn't flow easily off of our tongue. So it's just like Santo Danta is one who is calm and self controlled, right? It's just to say, hey, it's just to be easy. This is what my 200-hour yoga teacher training does, is teach you to just relax and to be not on the grind so much. Yoga, we use it as a fitness modality here in the States often. We do the masculine part of it, which is the outflowing of energy. And we don't do enough of the lunar part of it, the feminine part of it, which is the ingoing. So I just teach people that balance of relaxing, because we're going to go, go, go. We get driven at work, we get driven by our own goals and our own desires. So this is a way of sort of balancing that out.
So, as a life design consultant at John Hopkins University, how do you use these tools to help staff and other career transitions?
Yeah, definitely try not to lose the things that are proprietary to me. So, all the things you mentioned, the life force development, I have three different curriculums. I don't use those because obviously I'm not being paid for those. But as a life design consultant, there is some overlap. That framework comes out of Stanford University. Bill Barnett and Dave Evans, sort of the founders or the fathers of life design. So that framework is a little different for Hopkins. So I just implement that framework for the employees at the university.
Okay. And how does this all blend in with your new book, Autonomous Leadership Illuminating the Path from Shadows to Light?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking me about that. So, autonomous leadership is an amalgamation of all of those curriculums that I did. And I took, thanks to AI being around, I was able to take, years of transcripts. So instead of me going through the transcripts, I was able to take years of transcripts and make a couple of composite characters. So, I follow HIPAA guidelines. So if you were a client of mine, I wouldn't use your name, image, or likeness, and I wouldn't use your whole story. So I would make a composite character, which is maybe I'd borrow two things from your story, three things from her story, one thing from his story, and I make up this one character who is, a woman of color, and we give her a fictional name, but it's still real world issues that have been scientifically correlated. I won't say proven because didn't have rigorous academic peer review,
Mhm.
but there's a correlation between age, experience, ethnicity, or gender in most cases. And I put forth this work to just document. I had a 93% success rate in terms of getting people through their challenges, and so I thought it'd be good to put it in written form. And now I make it a prerequisite before you do my yoga training, because all of that is in there, and they give you a sense of the framework and just sort of the pedagogy that created me is in that first book. Well, this is my third book, but the first one really dealing with wellness and transformational coaching.
So, the first question that comes to mind for me is, what happened to the other 7%?
Yeah, well, that's great, right? Nothing, and I wouldn't trust anything in this world is perfect except for God. Your semblance of God. So anybody touting, but there are outliers, people who couldn't make it through the work. I'll give an example of when I don't know how old I was. I guess it's 2006. I climbed a live volcano. I climbed Pucon,
Okay.
and it erupted while we were on it, but like little bit, right? Like it. I understood why we call the earth Mother Nature, because it was like a woman breathing, and just the orifice looked very familiar. I mean, you take a guess, and it was just breathing, and then it would poof, and this lava would come up, and you'd hear everybody. First, we were like cheering, and then we were like, "Oh, OS, like this stuff is blowing." But I'm using that as an example. Halfway up the mountain, first of all, I've never prayed as much as I did the whole way up. The
All right.
ice was very slick. It was sunny, but halfway up the mountain, they give you an opportunity to leave. They say, "Hey, we're going to continue up to the summit, but does anybody here want to turn around?" It's terrifying. You're higher than the clouds, and when you look, it looks like if you fall, this is Pucon, that if you fall, you'll slide off the edge, and you really would. This is going to slide to your death. One girl did slip while we were there, and and it was two very unafraid Israelis that were on the mountain. I mean, they were like puppy dogs, these two guys, and they dropped their picks and they ran like football game, and they just tackled her and stopped her from falling. But just, so it was a very scary thing. So that's what happened to the 7%. As you go inward and start to do your shadow work, you get scared and you start to think, yeah, nah, I'm not gonna take this pill. I want to go back. I want to get out of the matrix, like the guy did. He was like, I want out. He was ready to go. So that's what happened to the 7%. They got scared. They jumped off. No, you know that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I think people are at different places in their journeys too. Sometimes it's a hiccup, sometimes it's a break.
Yeah.
Only God knows the perfect time for when you are going to come to whatever stage of development you're going to be in, and no one else knows. So, what may look like a failure or a stop may actually be a retooling space for a whole different direction of pathway that maybe not all of us have a finger on what that is. So I'm certainly not making light of it. I'm just always interested in the story behind the story, right? And if you can learn as much from that 7% as you can learn from the 93%, right? And so, how do we explore things like that? When you look at ancient yoga wisdom, how do you connect that with modern neuroscience?
Yeah, and actually, let me address one thing you said too. Let's take some of the focus off of them. Maybe I wasn't the right teacher for them as well too. So in some cases, it just be not a synergy thing. So it doesn't necessarily be that they were scared. It could be non-synergy, and it just didn't work. So as far as the question about how do I take ancient yogic wisdom and apply like modern day science, like are you suggesting neuroscience, or what do you mean when you say that question? I'm
Yeah, I'm saying neuroscience. I'm talking about many systems of thinking.
yeah. I don't. I mean, I just, like I said, I really just take it from my own myopic view because my experience is all I have. I'll make sure I point out, I give resources where there are resources outside of my own experience. But that's it. I mean, I've dibbled and dabbled in neuroscience. I am thinking about uh, pursuing a degree there, but I don't know. The reason I'm hesitant is that any amount of indoctrination changes you. So I'm not sure that I want to metamorphosize into that. I used to be a creative. I was Hollywood. I directed. I wrote. I was PA. I did everything in movies, television, and music videos. And then when I got this notion, I said, well, you know what? It's called the film business. So let me go to business school. And I went back to school and traveled abroad for a year. I was getting my MA, my MBA, and my PhD all at once at the end of those 4 years. And I had become a different person. I used to have a nose ring and locks, and I ended up being a little more conservative, throwing that tie and that sport coat. And so I changed a little because I wanted to, in order to pursue the level of wealth that I wanted to obtain. And then I wanted to be on top of that creative decision making process. But in the process of hybridizing that, I lost the purity and the innocence that I needed to be the type of creative I was. So, in a similar fashion, as I'm in this, so the delivery aspect, the artistic aspect of wellness, being a practitioner and a philosopher and a consummate student, I don't know, science takes you out of that student realm and starts to make you more fact based. And I'm not sure that I want to do it and who I would be doing it for. I just have to make sure I'm clear I'm doing it for myself and not anyone else.
Well, it seems like you've been doing good at doing it for yourself, but you've also attracted a lot of attention from a lot of conventional spaces. You've been featured on Good Morning America, Men's Health and People, and The Root. So, what is it about your work that is not only good for you, but it's good for others?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I mean, I was often, there was a blessing to be on those, to be featured on those sort of high level entertainment shows, if you will, or written in the web magazine like People. But I would be a little frustrated because they wanted to bring the emphasis to my personal story as opposed to the work. I felt more service oriented, and I really wanted to feature the people that I was working with, their stories, and the things they were overcoming, and that just wasn't the case. It was always about me, 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 and that was presenting me to the public in a way that I didn't feel comfortable, and it wasn't my intention. So sort of peeled back and started to get behind the scenes again and just quietly do the work.
Well, your version of quiet is a little bit different than others. I mean, you were already recognized by Barack Obama for the Presidential Award, Service Award. So your silence is loud.
Yeah, even that though, I mean, I really love that, and I get a lot of the flack from my family sometimes. Those awards are right over my shoulder, but I'm in my basement office. No one knows about them. The only reason they do now is because I sort of feel like I have to put it out there on LinkedIn and things for work. But I was a part of a group of amazing social impact leaders through Be Me communities. It used to be Black Male Engagement, Be Me, and now Be Me changed to Be Me communities. But it was several of us that were honored that day, including like actors like Lamont Rucker, people that have gone on to be semi-famous now, like Chris Wilson, Shaka Senghor. They're all part of that. So I was with that group. So I'm blessed enough to be with Walter Lomax. These amazing men. Like Walter did 42 years wrongfully convicted. 42 years.
Wow.
So he was honored that day. Akil, who's founded the Black Wrestlers Association, Akil Patterson, all these amazing Black men. And so it wasn't just me, so it was them. And yeah, I'm very humbled and honored by the award, but it was really because of the group. And Trabian Short is the leader of Be Me. uh, it was really his amazingness that got us all recognized. So yeah, I will put up my portion of it. But that's what it is. I try to keep good company. Like I consider you, Brother Kareem, just good company. And that's how you elevate by being in community.
So when you talk about community, you talk about designing community programs. How do you figure out what the needs are for the different types of groups that you approach, and when they're not ready for maybe some things that you might be thinking that they need to go to? Like, how do you slow down the rhythm to kind of find people where they are?
I love that question because it's what we always propagate, right? We always promote like, hey, people need to have a seat at the table, et cetera, et cetera. So I just make sure that if I change communities or if I'm in a community, I embed myself there, observe for a little while, become some kind of voluntary, coach, some board, community board, and then I start to have meaningful conversations with people. And so because I'm connected, I'm like a bridge, I'm connected between communities, excuse me, I will go and either speak for on the behalf of some of the people I've talked to, and I won't generalize. I'll say, hey, I'm talking to people here, talking to people there, and this is what I'm hearing. And then I'll do that. And then I stop when it's not effective. I used to do a program with ERC, the Evening Resource Center, trying to keep young juveniles from going into jail. I did that for 3.5, maybe 4 years. But just one day, I went in the group. They weren't responding. They weren't, I wouldn't say not respectful, just I wasn't reaching them anymore, literally in a day. And so I asked them, you know, what did they feel like they needed? And I got their words. And so, yeah, I made sure that I did not do that program anymore because I think young people do know what they want. I think the level of rigor for sort of the spiritual reflection that the work that I do requires that, yeah, I don't want to make anybody do it. It's always an invitation. And so it's time to go when it's time to go. And it's time to start it if the community feels like they could benefit from it.
I just want to backtrack a bit. To find a black male in the midst of yoga, how did you get there?
How did I get there? Wow. Well, there's many components to that story. I guess the the purest form of it is that my dad is a Morgan State University graduate. He was a physical education major, and he was just ahead of his time. Even though he was an Army sergeant and he was in the reserve for over 37 years, Since I came to the earth, I remember him doing yoga always, every single morning in the house. He'd be in the living room, and now that he's an older man, he's 83 now, but since I don't know, last maybe 10, 15 years, he out on the porch every day in the fresh air. And I don't care if it's snow or cold, he'll still be on that porch practicing yoga. So it was his modeling that did that. And when I had a pretty significant health crisis, I went to him and said, "Hey, you're never sick. You've always been pretty healthy. What is your secret?" He handed me this yoga book, and that's what I did to get myself right again. And that's why I promote that testimony, that part of it. Like, hey, again, not wagging the finger of judgment, but telling people this is what helped me in the darkest hour, and it could help you.
And when you talk about yoga, because you hear about different forms of kind of movement, energy work. How is it? How does yoga relate to like prana or Reiki or other forms of energy work through different cultures? Like what is it about that and being working in the yoga that attract? Well, you talked about your foundation, but what is it that sustains you in that space?
Yeah, I like that question. There's a lot of components to it too. I think just the first part of it, Sri Yukteswar, who is the teacher of one of the at least literary teachers I like, Mukunda Paramhansa Yoganandi, he always said there is no yoga, yoga's yoga. So it's like culturally, this was what East Indian folks or Hinduism and Taoism, they all sort of, in Buddhism, they borrow from the same aspects, but they call it a different thing. Kind of like we call a tree, but in Spanish they call it arbol. And so it's like prana, it's energy, it's the atom that it represents the living, breathing God, you could say, right? It's that smallest particle that gives us energy. That's really what prana is. But similarly, chi or ki, as it's pronounced, is the same thing. So I think we're all talking about the same thing, but because we have different cultural areas that we're in, it just gets a different name. So I think that's how it relates. What I've noticed in studying various different religions and reading various different authors, that they're all similar to the point of being the same. And at some point, you don't have to choose a side. You can just integrate and be one. And that's what all of these profound practices talk about: a singularity, a oneness. And when you get to that oneness, then you can just rest.
I want to get into the depth of this work, but I know we don't have enough time in this particular segment. So, if you could, in our exit from this particular episode, can you give us an example of a breath that all of us can kind of exit this episode with?
Hmm. I think I like Veloma 1 and Veloma 2 are some of my favorite breaths. They require kumbhaka and rachaka. Kumbhaka is like a retention, rachaka is an extended exhale. So when you're doing Veloma 1, you pause on the in breath. You can think of breathing from your diaphragm, which means the diaphragm, when you breathe, when you exhale, it goes up. It pushes the lungs up because the lungs are pleural tissue. They don't actually expand and contract as your diaphragm. When you inhale, the diaphragm goes down. And so when it does that, it's attached to seven major organs. So it is exercise, it's compressing and contracting these organs, your spleen, your liver, all of these things are getting activity, right? They're moving around. But when you retain your breath, you're given the exchange, the internal oxygen, longer time to exchange the CO2 and the oxygen exchange in the blood. So the blood goes in, the oxygen goes into the tissue, displaces the CO2, it comes into the blood and it exits. So when you retain, you do that. And when you exhale, you're building the diaphragmatic muscle tissue. And so that makes your diaphragm strong. So yogis like to say, forget about the bicep. The strongest muscle you want in your body is your diaphragm, because without the diaphragm, the brain can't think, and the heart can't beat. So this is where they want to put the attention. So we could leave with Veloma 1. You think of your lungs being in three parts. Your left lung does have three parts. The right lung has two lobes. And so you inhale for 2 seconds. I'll explain it. And then you retain that breath. You retain it for maybe 2 seconds as a beginner. And without exhaling, you inhale again and you retain the breath for 2 seconds. And then you inhale one more time, a clavicular breath, and you would retain for 2 seconds. And now you're going to exhale for 6 to 8. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you would repeat again.
Awesome. That is awesome. And if you are interested in how to breathe with power and presence, you need to tune in for our next episode with Changa Bell on life force and liberation here with us on Profound Conversations.